The towers of Vex Prime reached so high into the sky that clouds formed between their spires. These towers were made of crystal that shone with 1,000 colors when the sun hit them. Inside the tallest tower, 12 species sat in a grand chamber. They called themselves the Galactic Council, and they had ruled the known universe for 17,000 years. The council chamber was so large that it had its own weather. Sometimes rain fell inside while delegates talked about which planets could trade and which could not. They decided which species were smart enough to travel between stars. They chose who lived and who died. Their power was absolute and they never questioned it. On this day, the council was bored. They sat on floating platforms high above the floor, looking down at the small group of visitors below. The visitors were humans from a planet called Earth. The council members barely looked at the data screens showing information about humanity. Another primitive species from the edge of space, they thought. Nothing special. Kyle Harper stood on the floor far below the council members. He wore a simple black suit with no decorations. His small team stood behind him, just 5 people total. They carried no weapons. They had no guards. Kyle looked up at the 12 floating platforms and spoke in a calm, clear voice. Honorable council members, we come from Earth to request membership in the galactic community. We wish to trade with other worlds. We hope to learn from species more advanced than us. We ask for a seat at this table. High Arbiter Zexthal was the leader of the council. His body was made of living crystal that changed colors when he moved. He looked down at Kyle and the other humans with barely hidden amusement. These creatures were so small, so weak. Their ships could barely leave their own star system. Their weapons were simple chemical explosives. They had no energy shields, no faster-than-light travel, no gravitational technology. Your request has been reviewed, Zexthal said, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. Your species is not ready for council membership. You may trade within your own solar system. When you have proven yourselves worthy, perhaps in another 1,000 years we will reconsider your application. The other council members laughed. Some made comments to each other in their own languages. One delegate said loudly enough for everyone to hear, "They would make good workers once we properly train them." Kyle nodded slowly. He did not argue. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten or make demands. We understand. Thank you for your time and consideration. He bowed slightly, then turned and walked toward the exit. His team followed him without a word. The council members watched them leave. Such a passive species, one delegate remarked. So quiet and obedient. They accepted our decision without any protest. They know their place, another agreed. This is how primitive species should behave. Zexthal dismissed the humans from his mind before they even left the building. There were more important matters to discuss. The council had many species to manage, and humanity was the least interesting of them all. Kyle and his team walked through the streets of Vex Prime in silence. They passed aliens of every shape and size. Some looked at the humans with curiosity. Others ignored them completely. The humans were nobody important, just another rejected species going home with their dreams crushed. At the spaceport, Kyle and his team boarded their small ship. It was old and slow compared to council vessels. It would take them 3 months to reach Earth using their primitive engines. Only when the ship left Vex Prime's orbit and entered empty space did Kyle finally speak to his team. "Did you get everything?" he asked. Lieutenant Jake Morris nodded. "Every scan completed. We mapped their defense systems, recorded their communication frequencies, and analyzed their technology signatures. The council security never even noticed." "Good," Kyle said. "Send the data ahead through the quantum relay. I want our scientists studying it before we get home." Back on Earth, President Linda Morrison sat in a secure conference room deep underground. Around the table sat the heads of every major military branch, the top scientists, and the leaders of the secret space programs that the council knew nothing about. On the screen in front of them, Kyle's preliminary report appeared. "The council rejected our membership application as expected," Linda said to the group. "They think we are primitive and harmless. They believe we will accept their judgment and stay in our place." Secretary of Defense Gregory Collins pulled up a holographic display showing dozens of hidden facilities throughout the solar system. "Our production facilities are operating at full capacity. We now have 247 warships that the council doesn't know exist. They think we have 12 small defense boats." "What about the Gateway project?" Linda asked. Dr. Helen Cruz stood up. She was the lead scientist on humanity's most secret program. We successfully created a stable wormhole last week. We can now move ships across the galaxy instantly. The Council has nothing like this technology. They still use conventional faster-than-light drives that take weeks to cross the distances we can cross in seconds. Linda looked around the table at each person. The Council has ruled for 17,000 years. They are powerful and confident, but they made one critical mistake. They underestimated us. They think quiet means weak. They think peaceful means helpless. They have no idea what we have been building while they ignored us. Admiral Chris Bennett pulled up tactical displays. Our intelligence suggests the Council hasn't fought a real war in 8,000 years. Every species they conquered was already weaker than them. They have no experience fighting an equal opponent. They don't innovate. They don't adapt. They just rely on their size and their old technology. How long until we are ready? Linda asked. 15 years, Chris answered. We need that time to build more ships, train our forces, and position our assets. We also need time to study the Council's weaknesses, but when we move it will be decisive. Linda nodded. Then we have 15 years to prepare. The Council thinks we accepted their judgment. They think we will spend the next 1,000 years slowly crawling toward respectability. They have no idea we are preparing for something very different. She looked at each person in the room. For 15 years we smile and bow. We attend their functions when invited. We act grateful for whatever scraps they throw us. We let them think we are exactly what they believe us to be, weak, primitive, and harmless. And after 15 years? Someone asked. Linda's expression was cold and determined. After 15 years, we show them what humanity really is. We show them what happens when you mistake silence for acceptance. We show them the cost of underestimating a species that spent its entire history fighting and surviving. Across Earth and throughout the solar system, the secret work continued. In orbital stations hidden behind the moon, workers assembled weapons that operated on principles the Council had never imagined. On Mars, in underground complexes, millions of artificial minds ran combat simulations day and night. On Europa, beneath kilometers of ice, engineers tested technology that the Council had banned because they feared it. None of it appeared on any official record. When Council inspection ships made their occasional visits, they saw only what humanity wanted them to see. Struggling colonies, inefficient factories, primitive technology. The inspectors filed their reports and left, completely confident that humanity was going nowhere. The Council never wondered why the humans always seemed so calm. They never questioned why humanity's ambassadors had such quiet confidence in their eyes. They never asked why a species that had just been rejected showed no anger, no resentment, no desire for revenge. They should have asked those questions. They should have wondered, but the Council was so certain of their own superiority that they could not imagine any threat from such a primitive species. It was their first mistake. It would not be their last, and in 15 years they would understand the cost of that mistake. Humanity went quiet and still. And while the Council thought themselves invincible, humans prepared for war. 15 years passed. In the vast timeline of galactic history, 15 years was nothing. The Council barely noticed the time going by. They continued their rule as they always had, confident and comfortable in their power. They had ruled for 17,000 years. 15 more years changed nothing, or so they thought. Commander Patricia Wells floated in the observation deck of a space station that officially did not exist. The station was hidden in the Oort cloud, the very edge of the solar system where no one ever looked. It was painted black and covered with special materials that made it invisible to sensors. To anyone scanning from far away, this region of space appeared completely empty. But it was not empty. Below Patricia's observation window, spread out across thousands of kilometers, floated a fleet that would terrify the Council if they knew it existed. 347 massive warships hung silent in the darkness. Each one was larger than anything the Council thought humanity could build. Each one carried weapons that operated on principles the Council had never imagined. How many support ships do we have now? Patricia asked her second-in-command. Lieutenant Jake Morris checked his data pad. 694. Troop carriers, supply ships, repair vessels, hospital ships. Everything we need to support the battle fleet. Patricia allowed herself a small smile. And the Council thinks we have 12 patrol boats capable of defending our own solar system. They sent an inspection team 3 months ago, Jake said. They saw our official defense fleet, 12 old boats with outdated weapons. They wrote in their report that humanity poses no military threat to anyone. The inspector actually laughed when he filed his report. Perfect, Patricia said. Let them laugh. Let them think we are harmless. Every day they underestimate us is another day we get stronger. She turned from the window and walked to the tactical display table. It showed the entire galaxy with hundreds of small markers scattered throughout Council space. Status on our intelligence network? We have stealth probes in 42 Council systems, Jake reported. They have been there for years, watching and recording everything. We know their patrol patterns, their response times, their communication protocols. We know more about their military deployments than most Council admirals do. Patricia pulled up a tactical analysis. The Council's home defense fleet has 2,000 ships. That sounds like a lot, but our analysis shows that half of them are undermanned. They cannot find enough qualified crew because Council species are comfortable and lazy. They have not fought a real war in so long that military service is no longer popular. Their weapon systems are outdated too, Jake added. They have not updated their targeting computers in 3,000 years. They still use the same tactics they used 8,000 years ago. They rely on overwhelming force and superior numbers. Which works fine against primitive species, Patricia said. But we are not primitive. We just let them think we are. On Mars, deep underground where the red sand hid secrets from orbital sensors, millions of artificial intelligence cores worked without stopping. They ran combat simulations, testing every possible scenario humanity might face. They analyzed Council tactics and found the weaknesses. They designed counter-strategies that would work against opponents who had never faced adaptive warfare. Dr. Helen Cruz walked through the main AI research facility, watching screens filled with data flowing past faster than human eyes could follow. The artificial minds were learning, evolving, becoming smarter with every simulation. They would control many of humanity's systems during the coming conflict, making decisions in microseconds that would take human commanders minutes to process. How confident are we? Asked Admiral Chris Bennett. He had come to Mars to review the AI systems personally. Very confident, Helen answered. The Council species think in predictable patterns. They have standard responses to every situation, because those responses have worked for thousands of years. Our AI systems have mapped all their patterns. We can predict what they will do before they do it. Chris nodded slowly. What about their technology? We stole a lot of their designs over the years. Helen pulled up a holographic display showing various Council weapons and ships. This is the interesting part. Council technology is actually inferior to what they could have. They banned certain innovations because they came from species the Council considered inferior. They suppressed good ideas because accepting them would mean admitting that lesser species could be smart. So they crippled themselves, Chris said. Yes, they sacrificed innovation for pride. Meanwhile, we took ideas from everywhere. Human engineers worked with artificial minds. We studied every species we could learn about. We did not care where good ideas came from. We just used them. Chris walked along the rows of AI cores, their lights blinking in complex patterns. 15 years ago, when the Council rejected us, I was angry. I wanted to hit back immediately. Now I understand why President Morrison insisted we wait. We needed this time, not just to build ships, but to learn everything about our enemy. On Earth, in a secure bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Kyle Harper met with the newest group of ambassadors being trained for duty. These men and women would be humanity's face to the galaxy. They would attend Council functions, make polite conversation, and smile while gathering intelligence. Your job is to be forgettable, Kyle told the group. Be polite. Be friendly, be boring. The Council should think of you as harmless diplomats who pose no threat. While they ignore you, you will watch and listen and learn. A young ambassador named Lisa Grant raised her hand. What if they ask about our military capabilities? Tell them the truth, Kyle said. We have 12 patrol boats. Show them images of our official defense fleet. Let them see our outdated weapons. Let them laugh at us. Their contempt is our greatest advantage. It must be hard, another ambassador said, letting them mock us, accepting their insults. Kyle thought back to that day 15 years ago when he stood in the Council chamber and accepted their rejection without protest. It is hard, he admitted. Every instinct tells you to fight back, to defend your pride. But pride is a luxury we cannot afford right now. Winning is more important than pride. He pulled up images of the hidden fleet, the secret bases, the advanced technology that the Council knew nothing about. We are not accepting insults because we are weak. We are accepting insults because we are smart. The Council thinks they won when they rejected us. They have no idea that their rejection was the best thing that could have happened to humanity. Why? Lisa asked. Because it freed us from their rules, Kyle explained. If they had accepted us into the Council, we would have had to follow their laws. We would have had to limit our military. We would have had to open our systems to their inspections. We would have become just another controlled species. But because they rejected us, we could do whatever we wanted. We could build in secret. We could develop forbidden technologies. We could prepare for war without anyone watching. Across the solar system, in hundreds of hidden facilities, humanity's preparations continued. Factory stations produced ammunition at rates that would shock the Council. Training centers prepared soldiers for combat in environments the Council had never considered. Research laboratories finalized weapon systems that would revolutionize warfare. The Quantum Gateway project was ready. Dr. Cruz had perfected the technology that would allow human ships to cross the galaxy in seconds. The Council still used old faster-than-light drives that took weeks to travel between star systems. Humanity would use wormholes, appearing anywhere they wanted without warning. Admiral Chris Bennett stood on the bridge of the command ship looking at the tactical displays. Red markers showed every Council military installation, every fleet position, every defense station. Green markers showed where human forces would strike. The plan was complete. Every detail had been checked and rechecked. "Are we really ready?" asked Captain Susan Hayes, his tactical officer. "We have been ready for 6 months," Chris answered. "We are just waiting for the right moment." "The Millennial Summit," Susan said. "When all the Council leaders gather on Vex Prime to celebrate their invincibility." Chris nodded. "They will all be in one place, congratulating themselves on 17,000 years of unbroken rule. Their guard will be down. They will be thinking about parties and ceremonies, not about war, and that is when we will strike." "It seems almost unfair," Susan said quietly. Chris looked at her. "The Council has crushed dozens of species who tried to resist them. They have killed billions of sentient beings. They have suppressed innovation and progress for thousands of years. They maintain their power through fear and violence. Is it unfair to stop them?" Susan shook her head. "No, you are right. Besides," Chris added, "we tried the peaceful way. We asked politely for membership. They laughed at us. They called us primitive. They said we would make good workers once they trained us. They made their choice. Throughout human space, the final preparations were complete. Every ship was fueled and armed. Every crew was trained and ready. Every system was tested and functioning. The entire operation was synchronized down to the second. When the order came, 347 warships would disappear from hidden positions throughout the solar system and reappear at 30. The grand celebration hall on Vex Prime was more magnificent than anything humans had ever built. It stretched for kilometers, so vast that artificial gravity generators had to maintain different zones to prevent disorientation. Thousands of delegates from across the galaxy gathered for the Millennial Summit, a celebration held only once every 1,000 years. High Arbiter Zexthal stood at the central podium, his crystalline body refracting the light from 1,000 floating lamps into rainbow patterns that danced across the walls. His voice boomed through the hall, amplified by technology so old that no one remembered who invented it. "For 17,000 years we have maintained perfect order across the galaxy," Zexthal declared. "Not a single species has successfully challenged our authority. We are eternal. We are invincible. We are the Council and we shall rule forever." The assembled delegates erupted in cheers and applause. They drank expensive drinks and ate exotic foods from 100 worlds. They congratulated each other on their wisdom and power. They felt safe and secure in their superiority. In the back of the hall, Ambassador Kyle Harper sat with his small delegation. He wore the same simple black suit he had worn 15 years ago, when the Council rejected humanity's application for membership. He applauded politely when others applauded. He smiled when others smiled. He looked like just another minor diplomat from an unimportant species. But under the table, hidden from view, Kyle checked his watch. The timepiece was not just a watch. It was a quantum communicator linked directly to Admiral Chris Bennett's command ship. Kyle pressed a small button on the side. The signal traveled instantly across 73 light-years of space. On the command ship hidden in the Oort cloud, Admiral Chris Bennett felt his communicator vibrate once. That single vibration meant everything. The council leadership was confirmed present at the celebration. All pieces were in position. It was time. Chris looked around the bridge at his crew. They had trained for this moment for 15 years. They knew their jobs. Every officer, every technician, every crew member had practiced their role thousands of times. There would be no mistakes. All ships, Chris said quietly into the communication system, execute protocol nightfall. Across human space, in hidden bases and concealed stations, 347 warships received the order simultaneously. Their quantum gateway systems activated. Space itself bent and twisted around them. One moment they were scattered throughout the solar system. The next moment they vanished. The council had no idea what was coming. The human ships reappeared at 37 locations across council space in perfect synchronization. They materialized in orbit around key military installations, near major fleet bases close to critical communication relays. Their stealth systems were still active, making them invisible to every sensor the council possessed. For 7 minutes, nobody noticed anything wrong. The celebration on Vex Prime continued. Delegates drank and laughed. Zexthal continued his speech about council invincibility. Then the communication systems began dying. All across council space, military communication relays simply stopped working. Not jammed, not disrupted. Gone. Destroyed by kinetic projectiles that had been launched weeks earlier, traveling at significant fractions of light speed. The projectiles had been too small and too fast for council sensors to detect. They arrived at their targets at exactly the same time, reducing sophisticated communication equipment to clouds of expanding debris. In the Council Military Command Center on Vex Prime, alarm systems started screaming. Sensor officers stared at their screens in confusion and growing horror. "What is happening?" demanded Fleet Marshal Thorak, his forearms gesturing frantically at the displays. "Sir, we have lost contact with every fleet, every station, every defense platform," a sensor officer reported, his voice trembling. "All military communications are down." "All of them? At the same time? That is impossible." "Sir, we are also receiving reports of unknown vessels appearing throughout council space. They are not matching any known signatures." Thorak felt cold fear settle in his stomach. "How many vessels?" The sensor officer's voice broke. "Thousands, sir. They are everywhere. And sir, they are appearing inside our defensive perimeters. I do not know how they got there." Across council space, 37 separate battles began simultaneously. Council forces found themselves facing enemies who had appeared from nowhere, attacking with precision that seemed impossible. The human ships knew exactly where to strike, exactly which systems to target, exactly how to disable council defenses with minimum casualties. It was not a battle. It was surgery. On Vex Prime, the celebration had stopped. Delegates were shouting questions, demanding answers, calling for their security forces. But the security forces were not responding. They were too busy trying to understand how human special operations teams had infiltrated the planet weeks ago and were now systematically taking control of key locations. Kyle Harper stood slowly. Around him, council delegates were panicking. He walked calmly to the central podium where High Arbiter Zexthal stood, his crystalline form flickering with colors that indicated confusion and fear. "What is the meaning of this?" Zexthal demanded. "What is happening?" Kyle's voice was calm and steady. 15 years ago, I stood before the council and asked for membership. You rejected us. You called us primitive. You said we would make good workers once you trained us. You laughed at us. "This is an attack," Zexthal said. "This is war." "No," Kyle corrected. "This is the consequence of underestimating humanity. You thought we went home and accepted our place. You thought silence meant submission. You were wrong." High above Vex Prime, the Council's home defense fleet tried to respond to the crisis. 2,000 warships moved to engage the human forces that had mysteriously appeared in orbit. But something was wrong. Their targeting systems could not lock onto the human ships. Their weapons would not fire. Their communication systems were receiving interference on every frequency. Admiral Patricia Wells watched from her command ship as the Council fleet floundered. "Their systems are over 3,000 years old," she said to her crew. "Our electronic warfare systems are reading their command codes in real time. We are inside their networks. We control their ships better than they do." She opened a communication channel on all Council frequencies. Her message was broadcast to every military installation, every warship, every defense station that still had power. This is Admiral Patricia Wells of Earth's Space Defense Fleet. We have disabled your communications infrastructure. We have positioned forces throughout your territory. Your orbital defenses have been neutralized. You are now fighting 37 separate battles simultaneously, and you have no way to coordinate a response. She paused, letting that information sink in. Across Council space, commanders were realizing the truth. They were cut off from higher command. They had no reinforcements. They were on their own against an enemy that somehow knew everything about them. We did try to join peacefully, Patricia continued. You chose contempt. This is what happens when you mistake quiet for weakness. The Battle of Vex Prime lasted exactly 4 minutes and 17 seconds. The Council's home fleet, the most powerful concentration of military force in the known galaxy, never fired a single shot. Human electronic warfare systems had infiltrated their computers, locked down their weapons, and disabled their engines. The mighty warships hung in space, completely helpless. Not one Council ship was destroyed. Not one Council crew member was killed. The human forces had disabled them with such precision that casualties were zero. This was the most humiliating part. The Council had not been defeated in glorious battle. They had been turned off like broken machines. On the surface, in the celebration hall, Kyle continued speaking to the assembled delegates. For 17,000 years, the Council decided which species were worthy. You chose who could advance and who must remain primitive. You killed billions who dared to resist. That ends today. What do you want? Zexthal asked, his voice small and defeated. What we asked for 15 years ago, Kyle answered. A seat at the table. Trade routes. Technology exchange. But this time we are not asking permission. President Linda Morrison's image appeared on every screen in the hall. She addressed not just the Council, but every species across the galaxy. We are not here to conquer you, Linda said. We are not here to enslave you. We are here to end a system that has oppressed the galaxy for 17,000 years. The Council maintained power through fear and violence. They crushed innovation. They restricted progress. They decided which species deserved respect and which deserved contempt. She looked directly at the camera. Humanity was judged unworthy. We were told to accept our place. We were dismissed as primitive and harmless. The Council made a mistake. They assumed that species who do not threaten are species who cannot threaten. They forgot that the quietest person in the room might be the most dangerous. Across Council space, the battles were ending, not because the Council surrendered, but because they could not fight. Human forces had taken control of every strategic system, every major installation, every critical resource. The coordination was perfect. The execution was flawless. The Vorlax Imperium, the most warlike of the Council species, tried to launch a counterattack. 3 days after Protocol Nightfall began, the Council's military forces were completely neutralized. Not destroyed, not killed, simply disabled and waiting for instructions from a command structure that no longer existed. Across the galaxy, millions of Council soldiers and sailors found themselves powerless, their ships dark, their weapons locked, their communication systems silent. But something unexpected happened. Human forces held their positions but did not advance. They controlled strategic locations but did not occupy planets. They disabled military targets but left civilian infrastructure completely untouched. Merchant ships continued trading. Civilian communications kept working. Daily life for most galactic citizens continued almost normally. This confused the Council species more than the military defeat had. Admiral Patricia Wells received hundreds of messages from Council commanders asking the same question. What happened next? When would the human occupation begin? When would the demands for surrender come? When would the executions start? Patricia recorded a single message and broadcast it to every Council military installation. You are not prisoners. You are not conquered. Your people are not enslaved. We disabled your military because the Council had to end, but we are not replacing one tyranny with another. Repair your ships. Return to your homes. The war is over. There will be no occupation. There will be no revenge. There will only be change. Many Council officers thought it was a trick, some kind of human deception. They waited for the other shoe to drop, for the real demands to emerge. But days passed and nothing happened. Human forces simply stayed in position, waiting. On Vex Prime, the Council delegates remained in the celebration hall under human guard. The guards were polite and professional. They brought food and water. They allowed delegates to contact their homeworlds. They even permitted council members to meet and discuss their situation. The only thing they could not do was leave. High Arbiter Zexthal sat in a side chamber with the other senior council members. His crystalline body had turned a dull gray color, indicating deep shame and confusion. "What do they want?" asked Councillor Martek of the Kelvor species. "They defeated us completely. They could demand anything. Why are they just waiting?" "Perhaps they are savoring their victory," suggested another delegate. "No," Zexthal said quietly. "I have been studying the humans since their attack. This is not how conquerors behave. They disabled our forces without killing. They could have destroyed Vex Prime. They could have bombarded our homeworlds. They could have done to us what we did to dozens of species who resisted the Council, but they did not. Then what do they want?" Before Zexthal could answer, the chamber doors opened. President Linda Morrison walked in, accompanied by only 2 aides. She wore a simple business suit. She carried no weapons. She dismissed her guards and closed the doors, leaving herself alone with the most powerful beings in the former council. "I know you are waiting for demands," Linda said, sitting down at the table uninvited. "You expect us to dictate terms, to humiliate you, to make you kneel. That is what the council would have done." She looked at each delegate in turn. "But we are not the council. We did not fight this war to become the next oppressors. We fought to end oppression." "What does that mean?" Zexthal asked. Linda pulled up a holographic display showing a new organizational structure. "The council is dissolved. In its place, we are establishing a federation. Every species has an equal voice. Every world has representation. Decisions are made by vote, not by decree. Development is encouraged, not restricted." "You expect us to agree to this?" Martek asked skeptically. "No," Linda said. "I expect you to resist. I expect you to hate this. You had power for 17,000 years. Now that power is gone, that must hurt. But here's the truth you need to understand. This is happening whether you agree or not. The only question is whether you participate or watch from the sidelines." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at Vex Prime. "We have already contacted the species the Council subjugated. We are offering them freedom, technology, and equal status. Most have accepted immediately. They suffered under Council rule for thousands of years. They are not interested in protecting your old system." "You are dismantling everything we built," Zexthal said. "Yes," Linda agreed. "Everything you built was constructed on the suffering of others. It must end. But that does not mean your species must end. You can join the Federation as equals. You can contribute your knowledge and experience, or you can refuse and remain isolated. The choice is yours." Over the following weeks, humanity made good on its promises. Species that had been classified as primitive by the Council received immediate access to advanced technology. Worlds that had been restricted from space travel were given ships and training. The quantum gateway network that had given humanity its strategic advantage was offered to every species without restriction. Dr. Helen Cruz became the director of the new Federation Science Institute. She stood before an audience of scientists from 40 different species and announced her core principle. Knowledge that is hoarded is knowledge wasted. The Council kept technology secret to maintain their power. We are doing the opposite. Everything humanity developed is now available to everyone. The gateway system, our artificial intelligence, our weapons technology, all of it. We will share everything. Some human officials disagreed with this approach. Secretary of Defense Gregory Collins argued strongly against it in cabinet meetings. "We have a technological advantage," he said to President Morrison. "We should keep it. What happens when these other species become as advanced as us? We lose our edge." Linda shook her head. "If we keep our advantage through secrecy and restriction, we become the Council. Just with different faces. The whole point of this was to create something better, something where progress benefits everyone, not just the powerful. But what if they turn against us? Then we deal with it. But I would rather risk that than become the oppressors we just defeated." Linda looked at him steadily. "The Council lasted 17,000 years through fear. Let's see if we can build something that lasts through cooperation." Not everyone accepted the new order peacefully. In the Outer Rim territories, a group of former Council military officers attempted to establish a separatist government. They claimed the old ways were superior, that hierarchy was natural, that some species were meant to lead and others to follow. The Federation response was measured but firm. Instead of sending military forces, they sent diplomatic teams. These teams were backed by economic incentives. Species that joined the Federation gained access to the Gateway Network, advanced medical technology, and collective defense agreements. Those that refused were not attacked. They were simply left alone. Most chose to join. The benefits were too significant to ignore. Worlds that had struggled for resources suddenly had access to trade networks spanning the galaxy. Species that had been isolated for millennia could now travel anywhere in hours. Medicine that had been restricted by the Council became available to everyone. The Separatist leader was a Vorlax warlord named Krethkal. He commanded loyalty from thousands of former Council military officers who believed in the old system. He expected the Federation to send warships to crush his rebellion. Instead, President Linda Morrison invited him to Earth for a personal meeting. Krethkal arrived expecting a trap. He was met at the spaceport by Linda herself, with no guards and no weapons. She took him to a simple office and offered him coffee. "Why am I here?" Krethkal asked suspiciously. "Because I want to offer you a job," Linda said. "Federation security advisor. We need someone who understands the old military structures, someone who knows how officers like you think, someone who can help others make the transition to the new system." Krethkal was stunned. "You defeated me. You destroyed everything I believed in, and now you offer me a position of authority. You were loyal to the Council. You believed in hierarchy and order. Those are not evil beliefs. You are not evil. You just supported a system that had become corrupt." Linda looked at him seriously. "People change. Civilizations evolve. The question is whether you want to be part of building something better, or whether you want to spend the rest of your life fighting for something that is already gone." It took Krethkal 3 days to decide. He accepted. Not everyone in the Federation was happy about it. Many species that had suffered under Council military forces protested. But Linda stood firm. "We do not build peace by excluding former enemies," she said. "We build it by giving them a reason to stop being enemies." 6 months after Protocol Nightfall, Dr. Helen Cruz published her comprehensive analysis of Council technology. The report shocked the galaxy. The Council had been technologically inferior to what they could have been. They had deliberately suppressed innovation. "We found thousands of designs in Council archives," Helen explained to the Federation Assembly. "Propulsion systems that were 30% more efficient than what the Council used. Medical treatments that could have saved billions of lives. Agricultural techniques that would have ended famine on dozens of worlds. All of these were banned because they came from species the Council considered inferior. The revelation caused outrage among former Council species. They realized they had been held back deliberately. 5 years after Protocol Nightfall, the galaxy was almost unrecognizable. The Quantum Gateway Network had expanded from humanity's secret weapon to the galaxy's primary transportation system. Species that had never met were now trading partners. Scientists from dozens of worlds collaborated on research that would have been impossible under Council restrictions. Ideas flowed freely across space in ways that had not happened for 17,000 years. Captain Jake Morris, promoted from his position on the stealth station, now commanded a Federation exploration vessel. His crew was not purely human. His navigation officer was Kelver. His chief engineer was Praxis. His medical officer was Telvan. His tactical officer was even Vorlax, one of the species that had once been humanity's enemy. They worked together despite their differences. Sometimes those differences caused problems. The Kelvor preferred indirect communication, while humans valued directness. The Praxis wanted strict hierarchy, while the Telvan preferred collaborative decision-making. Arguments happened regularly, but the arguments led to solutions. The diverse crew found approaches that no single species would have discovered alone. Their ship operated more efficiently than vessels crewed by only one species. The chaos of different perspectives produced innovation that uniformity never could. "It is messy," Jake admitted to Admiral Patricia Wells during one of her inspection tours. She had become the Federation's chief of naval operations, overseeing the transformation of military forces across the galaxy. Patricia watched the mixed crew struggling through a docking procedure. 3 different command styles were clashing. For a moment it looked like chaos. Then the crew members started adapting, finding middle ground, creating a hybrid approach that combined the best of each method. The docking completed smoothly. "That chaos is the point," Patricia said. The council had perfect order and perfect stagnation. We have messy progress. Give me messy progress any day. Not everything was peaceful. In the outer rim, scattered groups of council loyalists continued to resist. They attacked Federation facilities and disrupted trade routes. They claimed the old ways were better, that the council's authority was legitimate, that hierarchy was natural and right. The Federation response was consistent. Military force was used only when absolutely necessary to protect civilians. Otherwise, the approach was diplomatic and economic. Rebel groups were offered amnesty if they stopped fighting. Their grievances were heard and addressed when legitimate. The Federation did not simply crush resistance. It tried to understand and resolve the underlying causes. Some rebels accepted the offers. Others continued fighting. But as years passed and life improved for most galactic citizens, the rebel groups found less and less support. It was hard to convince people to fight for the old system when the new system was clearly better for almost everyone. Former High Arbiter Zexthal lived quietly on his home world. He had not accepted any official position in the Federation, but he wrote extensively about the Council's fall. His essays were studied in Federation academies as cautionary tales about the dangers of unchecked power. In one famous essay, he wrote, "The Council believed that stability required control. We thought that if we allowed species to develop freely, chaos would result. We were wrong. By controlling everything, we prevented growth. By restricting development, we created stagnation. We built a civilization that could last forever but could never improve." Humanity showed us that adaptation is more important than permanence. His writings were controversial among former Council species. Some accused him of betraying the old order. Others praised him for his honesty. But no one could deny that his analysis was accurate. The Council had fallen not because they were defeated in battle, but because they had stopped evolving. Dr. Helen Cruz retired from her position at the Federation Science Institute after 5 years of intense work. Her replacement was a Telvan scientist who had been suppressed under Council rule. The transfer of authority was smooth and unremarkable. That was perhaps the most remarkable thing. Power changed hands without violence or conspiracy. At her retirement ceremony, Helen addressed the gathered scientists from dozens of species. "When I started this institute, some people said that sharing all our technology was foolish. They said humanity would lose its advantage. They were right. We did lose our advantage, and that was the best thing that could have happened." She pulled up displays showing technological advances made by non-human species in the past 5 years. Breakthroughs in medicine, engineering, physics, and a dozen other fields. We could never have discovered all of this alone. By sharing what we knew, we unlocked the potential of 300 species. The galaxy is advancing faster now than it has in 10,000 years. That is worth more than any temporary advantage. President Linda Morrison served 2 terms and then stepped down voluntarily. This shocked many galactic citizens. In Council times, leaders held power until they died. The idea of willingly giving up authority was foreign to most species. At her final address, Linda explained her reasoning. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The Council forgot this truth. They held authority for so long that they began to believe they deserved it naturally. They thought their rule was inevitable and right. We cannot make that same mistake. She looked out at the assembled press and citizens. The Federation works because no one person or species controls it. I was president for 10 years. That is long enough. Someone else should lead now. Someone with new ideas and fresh perspectives. This is how we avoid becoming what we destroyed. Her successor was not human. The Federation elected a Kelvor leader named Sorval. Some humans protested, claiming that humanity had earned the right to lead, but most accepted the decision. The whole point of the Federation was equality. If humans demanded special status, the entire system would collapse. On Earth, ordinary people adjusted to the new galactic reality. Children grew up learning multiple languages and studying the histories of alien species. Human scientists collaborated with non-human colleagues on routine projects. Trade with other worlds became normal and unremarkable. The Earth Defense Force was reduced in size as collective Federation security systems took over. Admiral Chris Bennett oversaw the transition from human military dominance to integrated Federation forces. It was difficult for many military officers to accept. They had spent decades building human power. Now they were sharing it with former enemies. It feels like we are giving up what we fought for. Captain Susan Hayes said to Chris during a planning meeting. Chris looked out at the orbital shipyards where human vessels worked alongside Vorlax, Kelvor, and Praxis ships. We fought to end oppression, not to become the new oppressors. If we had kept military superiority, we would have eventually used it to enforce our will. That is how the Council started. They probably had good intentions at first, but power made them corrupt. He turned back to Susan. Besides, look at what we have gained. Human ships now incorporate Telvan computing systems, Kelvor navigation technology, and Praxis engineering innovations. We are stronger as part of the Federation than we ever were alone. The Quantum Gateway network continued expanding. Soon it connected thousands of star systems. The Council's old territory, which had taken weeks to cross, could now be traversed in hours. New regions of space were opened for exploration. Species that had been isolated for millennia made contact with galactic civilization. Each new species presented challenges, different biologies, different cultures, different values. Some species were aggressive. Others were suspicious. A few were genuinely alien in ways that made communication difficult. But the Federation had learned from its mistakes with the Council. Instead of imposing a single standard, it accommodated diversity. Jake Morris's exploration vessel made first contact with a species called the gingen. They communicated through color changes in their skin rather than sound. Human linguists had worked for months to develop translation systems. The first meeting was awkward and confusing. The gingen did not understand human concepts of individual identity. Humans struggled with gingen collective decision-making. But instead of declaring the gingen too alien to integrate, the Federation worked to bridge the gap. Specialized interfaces were developed. Cultural exchange programs were established. It took 2 years before the gingen felt comfortable joining the Federation. But they did join, bringing unique perspectives on mathematics and physics that advanced galactic science significantly. Not every first contact went smoothly. Some species rejected Federation membership. Others tried to join but found the adjustment too difficult. The Federation did not force participation. Species were allowed to develop at their own pace. If they wanted isolation, they could have it. The door remained open if they changed their minds. On the 10th anniversary of Protocol Nightfall, the Federation Assembly held a memorial ceremony. They honored not just the few casualties from the brief war, but all the beings who had suffered under Council rule for 17,000 years. Billions who had been killed for resisting. Countless innovations that had been suppressed. Entire species that had been held back from reaching their potential. Ambassador Kyle Harper, now truly retired and quite elderly, was invited to speak.